Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Hakumei in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 19, Part 2, Acting. Naruto was not in the best of spirits when Gamekaki returned. He was thinking about what had happened earlier. Had he not been held back, Naruto would have killed that sound guy. What was worse was the sick feeling that somewhere he would have gotten a savage pleasure out of it. The thought of it made his stomach hurt. Every time he closed his eyes, Naruto could see the eyes that he had seen when he was younger looking out at him, and he could feel its frustration. It had wanted to kill that guy. It hadn't been particularly discriminate. If Sasuke had been there, Naruto might have attacked him too. It was possible that after a while, he would get into such a rage that it wouldn't matter to him who he was fighting as long as someone suffered. He stared into the fire that Sasuke had made, wondering if maybe they would be better off if he left them. If he could snap like that then. If you do very much more brooding, I'm going to punch you again, Sasuke's voice cut in, and this time, I'm going to mean it. Naruto, who was Sasuke's usual sparring partner, knew very well what that meant. Or, if Sasuke doesn't beat that out of you, Sakura smirked, I could use Tsunade's method for when Sasuke started to get broody about his family. Naruto also knew what that meant, and he had not interest whatsoever in being force-fed every sweet thing that Sakura could find, in this forest, that might kill Naruto by itself, and then hung up from a branch in his underwear for all the world to see. Guys, Naruto mumbled, you saw it, didn't you? Yeah, Sasuke muttered, you'd think that Kyuubi would do more damage, wouldn't you? Gaara's always got his sand, and I was expecting a little more of a reaction when you finally lost it. Truthfully, it's a surprise that you didn't kill that bandaged guy in the first move. What? Naruto was shocked. Sakura smiled a little nervously. Well, Naruto, ever since you told us about Kyuubi, Sasuke and I have been researching about it and its abilities. Hinata had guessed that your father had tried to make the seal as beneficial to you as he could, but there was only so much that he could do. We thought that it might be a good idea to know what the Kyuubi could do so that we knew what to expect if you even tapped into its power. Naruto had never really researched the powers of his tenant. He really didn't want to acknowledge that the thing was even there, but now he wished that he had thought about something other than his own issues with being a Jinchuriki. What does it do? Naruto had to ask. According to most sources. Sasuke asked, anything it feels like. It's the most powerful of all of them, and it's probably the most intelligent as well. It really can plot, not like Sandy Wandi, who just seems to scream about killing people. Kyuubi plots things out in advance. That's probably why it didn't force more of its chakra into you. It wanted to get you used to the feeling so that it could push more and more into you before you really noticed the difference. And that would do what? Relieve stress. Naruto asked, I don't see what Fuzzy Wuzzy's getting out of that. Neither do I, but I think Jiraiya has a pretty good idea, Sakura said thoughtfully. Ero Sennin is going to die if he's keeping something that important from me, Naruto growled, I'm not a little kid anymore, and it's kind of important to me since it really does concern me a whole lot more than it does him. Well, you can use that one jutsu on him later then, Sasuke said rolling his eyes, you know, the one that Sakura almost killed you for when she saw it. Sakura glared at Naruto. Before the conversation could continue much further there was a popping sound and Gamekaki appeared, looking a little worried and holding a bag of candies that Kimimaro had probably given to him. You look upset, Sakura remarked, is there anything wrong? She looked like she was ready to get up and run over to wherever the toad told her to go. Then again, she was Hakumei's head medic, and while Haku and Hinata were both good, Sakura really was Tsunade's apprentice, and Naruto had once overheard Jiraiya remarking that she probably could surpass Tsunade one day. Well, Kimimaro has a message for ya, and, it's not good, Gamekaki mumbled, there's a freaky psycho dude running around who tears people's legs up and eats them or something. There was silence. Run that by me again, Sasuke said, blinking a little. There's a guy or something running around who literally tore another team apart. Kimimaro, Niji, and Haku found the remains. Kimimaro says that you're going to need to call a meeting when you all meet up again cause the Chunin exams are looking a lot more dangerous than they should be. If you ask me, which you're not, I'd say there's something really weird going on in this little exam, and you're not the only ones with another agenda. I see what you mean, Sakura said thoughtfully. If there's someone who can do that, we don't know what else the people here can do. My dad always tells me to be suspicious about things like this. Gamakaki nodded. Your dad is the Yakuza toad with the Seik addiction, right? Suzuki asked. Isn't he the boss of the toads? My dad's not a Yakuza. Gamakaki yelled. At any rate, we all agree that you've made a good point. Thanks a lot for your help, and would you mind taking an answer to the others? Naruto asked, trying to gloss over the thing. Gamakaki would argue for hours, as Naruto knew from personal experience. The toad glared over at Suzuki, but seemed to decide that he was going to act like an adult and nodded, not even asking for sweets the way he usually did. He seemed to want to prove something to Suzuki. Gamakaki agreed to take the message that they were all okay, and they would meet the moment they could and discuss what to do with the information that Team Kekkai Genkai had found out. Well, I guess now all we have to do is head for the center and wait for the others, Naruto said, looking back into the fire. Not only was there the Kyuubi to worry about, there was this unknown factor. The others didn't seem to be in much of a mood to talk either as they all sat, watching the flames. Was what Gamakaki had said true? At first everything had seemed so simple, but now. It looks like this exam is going to be a whole lot more interesting than we thought, Suzuki said. Sakura nodded, and for once, I think that it's going to be really dangerous. Well, the freaky psycho dude has a scroll, hopefully the right one, and we have some more traps ready. Sakura, you can take the first watch, Suzuki you take the next one, and I'll take the last one, Naruto said. If anyone comes, we'll give them a real surprise. If worse comes to worse, we kill them. And if you're going to kill them, use whatever techniques that come to you. After all, dead men tell no tales, right? Where did you hear that? Sakura asked. It's a little poetic for you. It was in the latest Princess Fune movie, Naruto said without thinking. It was showing in the only theater in Wave. Me, Sai, and Kimimaro watched it while you and Haku were getting stuff, and Hinata, Gaara, and Niji were on guard in the base. Both Suzuki and Sakura gave him a rather murderous look. What? Hinata bit her lip a little and played with her fingers as Gamakaki disappeared, returning to wherever it was the toad summons actually lived. The scene that he had described turned her stomach and made her nervous. As a ninja, Hinata had been taught not to worry about pain or death, but she still hated to see other people in pain or cause deaths that were extremely painful. One good thing about her family's style was that, when applied right to the heart, it killed almost instantly, and the person never experienced too much pain. Gaara was looking worried as well, but he didn't seem as upset as Hinata was. Gaara had one of the highest tolerances to carnage of the group, second only to Sai, so that shouldn't have bothered him too much. If he was worried, he wasn't thinking about the carnage. Is something bothering you? Hinata asked. Well, yes. Gaara said at last. At first, I didn't really want to tell you since I wasn't sure that I was right or that it wasn't a big deal, but I felt the Kyuubi's chakra. What? Sai asked, looking up from the scroll that he was writing in. Gaara repeated himself, it wasn't very much of it. Well, I don't think that it was very much of it. My prisoner went into a fit once he sensed it, but I wasn't sure what it was at first. Naruto had never lost control before, so the chakra was strange to me, but there's nothing else that it could be. It could only be a Baijuyu and the chances that there is another one in this exam are ridiculously low. It was already strange for Naruto and I to both be Jinhuriki since we're the same age. So, Naruto lost control, why didn't he mention it? Hinata asked, already half guessing the answer. Because Naruto hates to make people worry about him, Sai said. You knew him even before you left, and you remember how people used to treat him. Hinata hadn't been allowed to wander around very much when she was young. She had already been kidnapped once. The last thing her father wanted was another incident like that. It was that kidnapping that she could never really talk too much about with the others. While they knew the basics, any lengthy discussion was too much for Niji. While Niji had forgiven her for being kidnapped in the first place, he would probably never quite forgive her father for using his father as a scapegoat. Niji would have been fine with living as an inferior member of the clan, but the fact that Hayashi had used his twin brother just to save his own life was too much for him. The longer the discussion lasted, the better a chance that Niji would leave and not return for the rest of the day. After the kidnapping, Hinata hadn't been allowed to be anywhere without at least one fully fledged ninja with her, but she had seen how the teachers at the academy viewed Naruto. She had seen the deep-seated hatred that burned in them every time they looked at him. It wasn't really even directed at him. It was like when they looked at Naruto, they were looking at a picture of someone or something else that they hated. Naruto had never spoken of it much. He seldom spoke of his pain. Once when they were sparring, Naruto dislocated his shoulder, but he refused to even show the pain. It was only when Jiraiya had noticed that he was holding himself strangely when he punched that they saw just how badly it was dislocated and he was wounded. Naruto hadn't even cried out when Tsunade had forced it back into alignment. For all that he acted fussy about some things, Naruto never liked to show weakness. Not really. He would think that since he wasn't hurt too bad, it wasn't worth mentioning. Hinata sighed. That sounds about right, Gaara agreed. I'm thinking of feeding him to one of my drawings, Sai said with the fake smile that showed he was probably dead serious about what he was saying. One day he's going to learn that there is no way that we will allow him to keep secrets like this. Hinata sighed. We'll confront him about this when we see him next. Stupid Naruto. Stupid heroic Naruto. Why did he think he had to be invincible? Didn't he think that people were worried about him? Of course he did, and that was why he hated to show weakness, Hinata thought. Naruto doesn't want to worry anyone. While he had gotten better and more open, he would still sometimes refuse to tell people when he was upset or hurt. One of these days, she promised herself, she was going to cure him of that for good. Would you like to know something? Niji said the next morning as he sat by the river that they had found. There's a huge difference between fishing and sitting at the side of a river with a stick in your hand, looking like an idiot. Well, Niji, you're doing a good job, Kimimaro muttered. He wasn't in that great of a mood since he had had almost no sleep that night. Maybe Gaara could live with insomnia, but he didn't like it all that much. Niji glared over at him, but Kimimaro ignored him. He really wasn't in the mood. It was early, very early. The sun had barely even risen yet, and they were already preparing to continue their work. It was going to be a quick breakfast of fish, if Niji managed to catch anything, and then they were going to be off and looking for a scroll to steal. From the sound of it, a lot of genin had already been eliminated. This really was for all practical purposes, an all-out war like Tsunade had described it. Haku was finishing packing up the rest of the things, and Kimimaro was watching for any kind of ambush while they waited. Kimimaro actually thought that this would be an ideal time for an ambush to occur. Most people were more lax during this time of the morning. There was a splashing sound that showed that Niji had caught a fish, and a moment later Kimimaro jumped down to see. It wasn't too big, but it would have to do. Sitting in one place like this was starting to make him a little edgy. Niji definitely agreed since he didn't look like he was going to continue. This really isn't enough, Haku said. Even if we are in some danger, it's probably better for us to have a full meal. We can get a full meal later, Niji grumbled. Besides, Sakura made some soldier pills for us. Haku stared at him with huge eyes. You're an incredibly brave person, Niji. He said, I'm sure that it's good for us, but Sakura's soldier pills are probably the most disgusting food I've ever eaten, and I have plenty of experience with disgusting foods. Kimimaro looked at the bag that each of them had a little dubiously. He had had the misfortune of having her soldier pills before. While Sakura's cooking usually wasn't all that bad, she seemed to be unable to make homemade soldier pills without making the person who ate them want to throw up. Even Sasuke had run off to the bathroom when he had had them once. I'll eat anything if it will get us out of here, even Sakura's soldier pills. Kimimaro would eat his in front of her just to please her if he had to, but he sure didn't want to do so when she wasn't there, and he didn't have to. If it's a choice between waiting for you to catch something else or eat that, I'll wait, Kimimaro said. I heard Sakura talking about this being some kind of industrial strength kind. Haku's face paled a little at the thought. Didn't anyone pack anything else? Haku asked. I didn't think that we'd end up having to play survival games in the middle of a forest without time to prepare. Seriously, there's no mission like this, Niji grumbled. He had a point, but there was always a chance that food would run out. Maybe this was for that kind of situation. That and this was a test of everything in one, not a mission simulation, although it did have similarities. They were looking for a scroll, which in other situations would be carrying vital information, and there were a large number of people aside from them looking for the same thing. The similarities ended there. Well, at any rate, Kimimaro sighed, it's Sakura's soldier pills, waiting for the fish, or eating what we have and living with it. I'm all for the third choice, Niji mumbled. I vote the second, Haku said, crossing his arms. Second, Kimimaro said, after a moment of thought. He did want to get going, but not until he was ready to fight, 2-1. Niji grumbled something that would have probably led to him having his mouth washed out by Tsunade and took up the stick again. Happy coincidence seemed to be on Niji's side, however. There was a sound like a twig breaking somewhere and footsteps coming nearer. Thoughts of breakfast were abandoned as Team Kekkai Genkai prepared for their long-awaited battle for another scroll and a chance to exercise their powers. You know something, Naruto said after about an hour of jumping through trees. I know a lot of things, Sasuke said. What thing are you talking about? Having those two scrolls is kind of like having Pandora's box, Naruto said as if Sasuke hadn't interrupted. Tell me about it, Sakura moaned, all I'm thinking about right now is what's in them. Maybe, it's a summon scroll and if you open it, the summon will eat you, Sasuke said in a monotone voice. Maybe it's a copy of one of the Ika Ika books, Naruto said thoughtfully. They would be able to tell who opened them pretty quick. Either the scroll would have blood on it from a nosebleed, the person would have this horrified look on their face, or they would have a slap mark from where their female teammate read over their shoulder and thought that it was something they had brought along. Maybe it's just a blank piece of paper with a seal on it that shows if someone's been opening it or not. Sakura looked over at the other two with a raised eyebrow. I guess we won't know, Naruto sighed, it's going to be like Kakashi-san's mask. You wanted to take it off too? Sasuke asked. I wonder if he's got big lips. Naruto said thoughtfully. Sasuke almost ran into a tree at that mental image. Or maybe buck teeth. Naruto continued. Sakura and Sasuke both stopped, a shudder running up their spines. Or a small mouth. Shut up, Naruto. Two voices rang out. Shut up yourselves, Naruto hissed, we don't know who's listening. Sorry, Sakura grumbled. Sasuke growled, then don't give us weird mental images. It was strange how they were talking normally like the whole Kyuubi incident hadn't even happened. Naruto wasn't sure whether he was happy or if he felt guilty. After all, he had lost control. The one thing that he had always promised himself that he would never do. And then there was the savage joy that he had felt at causing that destruction. Was that his pleasure or Kyuubi's? Naruto had no wish to attempt to speak to the creature, but that question worried him. Had he really enjoyed it? Would he have enjoyed killing that guy? No, Naruto couldn't believe it. While he knew that he was a little weird sometimes, he knew the things he liked and disliked, and killing other people wasn't a like of his. The chakra must have carried some of Kyuubi's personality and awareness with it. That was all. Naruto would have to talk to Jiraiya when he had a chance. That guy was a seal master, and Naruto might need to know some of his seals. Naruto had learned quite a few, but right now he wasn't up to a real master's standards. He hadn't taken it that seriously, wanting to learn Taijutsu and Ninjutsu, not just seals. Well, he had seen where he was wrong. Ero Sennin would probably be happy to do it, if only so that Naruto would have to proofread his books for him. No one else would do it. The center of the forest wasn't too hard to get to, but the closer they got to it, the bigger chance of getting ambushed there was. After all, teams who had lost their scroll, or hadn't found another one would wait for a team with two to come by and try to steal the scroll from them. There were two incidents where they narrowly avoided one of those ambushes, but there weren't any confrontations. Naruto wasn't sure, but there seemed to be a lot less people moving around, and it rather disturbed him. He wondered if any other people had fallen victim to whoever had killed the people that Team Kekkai Genkai had found. The center of the Forest of Death was a large building that looked like a combination of a hotel, a sports arena and a prison. It was large and squat with cameras in the trees and what looked like either gyms or torture facilities in other buildings around it. Naruto noticed that none of the windows had bars on them, but that didn't really convince him that there weren't prisoners being held there somewhere for some reason. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura stepped onto the path that led up to the building and looked around, noticing a small camera in one of the trees. He didn't give any sign that he had seen it, but looked past it and grinned at the others. Wada say we wait for the others for a while and see who comes in second place. He grinned. Kimimaro was prepared for almost anything, but the situation that presented itself was a little strange. There was a rustle of leaves, and a young man with grayish hair and glasses came running out, closely pursued by 3 ninja. The first was wearing Konoha's emblem, the others wore Iwa's. None of the little group seemed to have noticed that they had just run into someone else's camp. All right. One of the IWA nin cheered, I love it when prey runs. This is a very interesting situation, Niji said to Kimimaro, catching the IWA nin's attention, and even the Konoha nin stopped. I mean, they just run straight into us. What do you think? Haku nodded, and they're ganging up 3-1. Not at all worthy of a real ninja. Even if we cheat, there are some unspoken rules. Kimimaro and Niji refrained from reminding him about how they usually trained, but then again, in Kimimiro's opinion there were rules that were meant to be upheld when it was in their best interests to uphold them. When picking a fight with obviously hostile ninja, it was a perfect time to do it, if only to annoy them by being on the moral high ground. For some reason it just seemed to annoy them to know that their enemy was fighting for a moral reason and not just to fight. Kimimaro smirked and raised on hand with his thumb down, crush them. The Konoha nin was forgotten as the IWA trio and Team Kekkei Genkai stared one another down. Niji was smirking, Haku was in a fighting stance, and Kimimaro was simply watching to see what they would do. Ladies first, one of the IWA nin said to Haku. For a moment there was complete and total silence, then Haku began to make a series of hand seals and his eyes had narrowed. That was when the trio noticed that the air had become cold, very cold, and a mist had risen from nowhere. The trio didn't even see the barrage of senbon that had them paralyzed, and they could only watch in horror as ice slowly crept up their legs and bodies towards their heads. I am not a girl, Haku said softly, speaking each word carefully. It seemed that after a lot of stress, Haku had finally cracked. This happened every so often. After a while of being mistaken for a girl by his enemies, Haku would really attack them. Actually, that was one of the best ways for Haku, who hated to fight, to actually be serious. He would be fine again after that, and the whole thing would start up again. One of the ninja regained his senses enough to use his kunao to break the ice, and his teammates did the same. All of them stood back to back, looking for any sign of their attackers, who seemed to have melted into the mist. They didn't have full control of their limbs however, and they were shaking a little bit as their muscles twitched every so often. You know, Kimimiro's voice said somewhere in the mist, I was going to say that we should hold back since we don't know who we're facing, but I think I'm in a bad mood, and it really is getting boring to hear people constantly calling you a girl. Do what you want with them, Ryu. We'll clean up when you're done with them. What? Niji sounded annoyed. What would you do if someone called you a girl? Kimimaro asked. They wouldn't have to worry much about girls at all after that. I rest my case. There was an annoyed sound, but Niji seemed to understand what he meant. The mist was getting thicker as the IWA team huddled closer together. Sensatsu suisho. Haku's voice sounded from somewhere near the water. There was a splashing sound and Kimimaro knew that water was rising up and forming into very long, surprisingly sharp needles of ice. This wasn't his most powerful attack, but it was pretty dangerous. Kimimaro detected the hint of motion followed by screams that showed that the attack had been successful. There were other startled cries and moans from the IWA group. I'm going to let you live, Haku's voice said calmly, I didn't strike any vital organs. No one should die in this stupid exam. No matter what Anko-san said, but it will be a very long time before you are able to perform missions. Leave the scroll and go. There were some moans and finally someone spoke up. All right, we give. One of them said, the scroll's on the ground. We're going to go back the way that we came. We won't follow you, Haku said. There was a sound of two people, carrying a third walking off and jumping into the trees slowly and laboriously. You didn't leave us anything, Niji said, you're as bad as Taki. Other people would love to work on their attacks as well. And I had a cruddy job last mission. I'm sure the next one will be better, Haku said as the mist thinned. He was back as his usual passive, polite self. It was only then that they noticed that the Konoha-nin was still there. The gray-haired young man seemed to notice that all attention had focused onto him, and he raised his arms to show that he was unarmed and not a threat. Kimimaro finally recognized him as someone who had had a brief conversation with Naruto after he had publicly embarrassed that Sora person, something Kabuto. He looked like a complete pushover, but Haku did too. That wasn't worth a whole lot to him. Could we possibly suspend the exam rivalries for a while? He asked. You see, I was separated from my team, and since you already have 2 scrolls and I don't have one, it wouldn't be to your advantage to attack. And what's to stop you from trying to take the scrolls from us? Niji asked calmly. We have no idea what your power really is. Kabuto smiled a little bitterly. If I could fight against 3 armed opponents, you wouldn't have that second scroll. Also, my team already has our scrolls. It was really just bad luck that we were separated. I'm very grateful for your help though, even if I was only an addition to getting your last scroll, so if you want, I'll show you my data cards. Data cards? Kimimaro asked curiously. You've collected the statistics of the participants of the exams. Exactly, Kabuto nodded. I have some data on every person in the exams, and since you helped me, I'll help you. If you help me find my team, I'll allow you to see as many as you'd like. Ah, that's what he was doing. Kimimaro felt a part of him relaxing. This made sense. He didn't have any real protection, and he didn't have money, so he was bartering valuable information in return for their help. Trades like this that were not strictly legal were common in these kinds of competitions. Also, Kusa and Konoha didn't really have any kind of hostility towards one another yet, so this would be allowed within their villages much more than it would be between Konoha and Kumo. Niji looked over at Kimimaro and nodded. He was willing to make the exchange. Even if there was a chance they would end up fighting one another. Actually, some part of Niji was probably hoping for it. Haku nodded as well. He was willing to take the risk of a battle if the information was worth it. We agree, Kimimaro said calmly. My name is Yauma, this is Ryu and Haru. I'm Yakushi Kabuto, Kabuto said bowing. I'm glad that we could come to an arrangement. That was probably only so true. Kimimaro wasn't sure that he liked the man, but at the same time, he couldn't sense any desire to attack them. Kimimaro added Kabuto's name to his possible threats list and calmly walked over. I would like to see your cards on Uchiha Yumi, the person whom my friend Taki embarrassed named Sora, and an Abarame Shino, Kimimaro said, then turning to the others, asked, is there anyone who you want files on? Yes, Haku said thoughtfully, though it is a little underhanded. Can we see the files for 3 people named Aoi, Kyoko, and Ren? They're also from Kusa, but I don't remember anything about them and they seem dangerous. Kabuto laughed a little. You are underhanded. Well, it's no matter. Is that everything? Kimimaro and Haku looked at Niji, who shrugged. I think that the ones you asked about are the only ones worth worrying about. After all, we know all about Taki's team and Ariai's team, but there's a person who I'm vaguely interested in, but I don't know her name. She's a Konoha-nin with buns in her hair around my age. Kabuto looked thoughtful for a moment and looked through his cards until he seemed to find one that matched the description. Ah, you mean Tenten-chan, Kabuto said looking at one of the cards. She's a little mysterious, as is Yuki-chan, but I have some information on both of them. Kabuto handed Kimimaro 7 plain little cards with the pictures of each person on them, with Niji and Haku both looking over his shoulder. Uchiha Yumi was mysterious. There was little past history about her, but it appeared that she specialized in fire and earth techniques. She had transferred over to the academy only a year before becoming a genin and had completed a bunch of D-rank missions and won A rank. It was also noted that she hadn't activated the Sharingan. At least, she hadn't shown it off. Her weapon of choice seemed to be using 2 kunao at once like twin swords, a very interesting way to fight. Sora's card had much more data to it. Apparently, Sora had been born to one of the 12 Ninja Guardians, a group that swore itself to protect the Fire Daimyo, who had gotten a little overzealous with his beliefs. He had been left at a monastery and forgotten about until Danzo came into power. Danzo had ordered that he be brought to Konoha, had made into an official shinobi of the leaf. Sora was trained personally for some reason that the card didn't say, but it mentioned that he had wind-natured chakra, like Naruto, and he used a variant of a hand claw that from the picture looked pretty deadly. There was also something strange about his arm. The card didn't know too much, but hinted that there had been some kind of test made on it. Shino's card was the most informative. He was the son of the head of his clan, and, as such, the heir to the title of clan head. He was already considered exceptional at his family's style of jutsu and had received his second queen at the age of 7. Despite his accomplishments, there was little known about his personal life. Either he was completely reclusive, or people had a tendency to avoid him due to his habit of talking about bugs and not showing much of his face. On the whole, his skill level seemed very good, but the most dangerous thing about him was the fact that he was so difficult to read. He could be thinking almost anything. Aoi, Kyoko, and Ren seemed like pretty standard genin, and that by itself was odd. They had completed a lot of D-rank missions and 3 C ranks, but none of their skills looked all that interesting. Their sensei was briefly mentioned, and on the whole they looked like they should have been knocked out of the exam pretty quickly. That wasn't the feeling that he had gotten from those 3. If anything, they were hiding their potential. Mentally, Kimimaro moved those 3 higher up on his list. They were now probable threats instead for possible ones. Tenten seemed to have been from a civilian family that had been killed during a skirmish between some missing nin and Konoha before the Sandaime was killed. It had been a minor fight, but the people of that town where the fight took place suffered many losses, including Tenten's parents and siblings. She had been taken to Konoha and made into the live-in assistant of a weapon shop. The master of the shop had funded her going to the academy when the girl showed an interest in weaponry and fighting. Her skills were mostly concerned with weapons and using them, but she didn't seem to have any elemental affinity or real strengths in the realm of ninjutsu. On the whole, she might be dangerous, but she was not anything for them to worry about. Why was Niji looking so thoughtful then? Niji had been called a genius when he was younger, but sometimes Kimimaro fought hard to tell just how his mind worked. It seemed like he was forming some kind of plan, and it involved Tenten somehow. They would have to ask him what he was planning later. Kimimaro looked over at the others to make sure that they were done and handed the cards back to Kabuto. "Thank you," he said, observing all formalities. "Now, did your teammates and you have a point where you would meet up?" Kabuto looked a little embarrassed. "Not really," he said, scratching the back of his head. "This kind of thing wasn't something we planned for. Since we have our scrolls, I think the best turn of decision would be to just go to the center." "All right," Haku said, "there's a good chance that your teammates also went that way. I hope you don't get disqualified or anything." Kabuto laughed a little. "It's not too big of a deal. There are some strange people running around in this exam, and well, there's always next time. It's not like this exam is all that important." Kimimaro caught an odd glance in their direction when he said that, almost as if he was threatening them. No. That wasn't a threat, that was a warning. Kabuto knew something about the exams that he wasn't going to tell them. It was likely that he was more of a threat than any of the others, but at the moment, he just seemed like he didn't want them to get involved. Kimimaro was liking this person less and less as time went on. Well, there was one thing he could say for sure: this exam was going to be very interesting. Team Databia didn't have to wait all that long for Team Shigo. It had only taken 2 sparring matches between Naruto and Sasuke for them to turn up. Sakura had decided to be fun and throw in an exploding tag to catch their attention. Naruto and Sasuke both had to dodge and ended up almost jumping on top of Gaara only to be caught by his sand. "You guys need to stop hyper-focusing," Sakura shook her head. "I thought Sensei told you that." Yeah, Sasuke muttered. "Looks like you're all alright," Hinata said with a smile. "If you're sparring then nothing too serious attacked you." "Yes," Sai agreed, "we wouldn't be able to keep either of you quiet if you had. Or we might have to get some nets and catch you because your heads would have gotten so big you would have floated away." "Do the words 'shut up or I will tape it shut' mean anything to you?" Sasuke asked. Not much, Sai said, maybe glue would work better. How about my sand? Gaara suggested. Whose side are you on, anyways? Sai asked. Whichever one I like at the moment. Gaara said thoughtfully. Naruto laughed along with the others, and felt a part of him relaxing again. They still had to wait for Team Kekkei Genkai, and they had a meeting to do, but things were starting to feel normal again. Yuma, Ryu, and Haru are late, Sakura remarked. That's funny, I thought that they'd get here before us. Haru's going to be so annoyed, Hinata sighed, he's starting to feel left out of all the action. You're going to need to let him show some of his new techniques off soon or he's going to use them on you. Well, he'll probably get plenty of chances to use them now, Naruto said. I don't think that this little obstacle course was the last part of this exam. In fact, I'd be shocked if it was. I know what you mean, Gaara agreed. Sasuke said thoughtfully. Well, whatever happened, they would face it then. Besides, they still needed to wait for the others. As it turned out, they ended up waiting until evening, playing cards and holding sparring matches. One other team turned up while they were waiting and looked at them all like they were insane, but nothing else happened. There was little to herald their arrival. 1 minute they weren't there, and the next, they had jumped down from the trees. There was another person with them. Hinata looked a little nervous, and it took Naruto a moment to recognize him as Kabuto. He moved cautiously. This was odd, and Naruto didn't like things that he didn't understand. They set him on edge and made him feel unsure of what to do next. Hey, guys, he asked, what's going on? We agreed to escort Kabuto here to see if his team made it here, Niji said. As payment we got a little bit of information on some opponents. Please don't speak so loud, Haru-san, Kabuto said, if anyone hears, we'll all get into trouble. Security is much stricter here than in Kusa, Sakura remarked. Really? Kabuto looked interested. Well, things that aren't strictly legal are done all the time, Gaara spoke up, as long as no one is truly hurt by the information, and it's nothing that will lead to really killing them, it's not too big of a deal. Smaller villages are usually a little more lax than bigger ones, I suppose, Kabuto agreed. It does make sense given that they have to be more concerned with their own survival than the larger ones. There was definitely something wrong with Kabuto, Naruto decided. He was way too polite. They really needed to hold that meeting. Well, see you, Kabuto, Naruto said brightly. I hope we don't become matched up in the exams, Kabuto said, or the finals. And with those slightly strange words, he left them. Does everyone here seem to have their own hidden agenda, or is it just me? Sai asked. I hope that it's just you, Sakura said watching Kabuto's back. Okay, so now what? Naruto asked as all 9 of them stared at the scroll in the center of an empty room. They had been looking at it for a few minutes, but nothing had come to him. I think we're supposed to open our scrolls now, Haku said, at least, that's what the message up there seems to say. Are you sure that it's not just giving bad advice? Niji said, because that sounds like one of the old sayings that my family used to teach me. There were some half-hearted laughs from everyone, but no one was quite sure just what to do with this. The scroll on the wall did seem to indicate that that was what they were supposed to do. Well, it wasn't like they had any better idea. Ryu sounds like he might be right. Let's try it, Naruto said after a moment of thought. Quickly, all 3 teams had laid their scrolls down in the center of the room and opened them, waiting to see what would happen. There was a sudden puff of smoke from the scrolls, and everyone waited to see what had been summoned out of them. Brats. A familiar, irritated voice yelled. You're kidding, Sasuke said. As the smoke cleared, a very annoyed-looking Zabuza came into view. His arms were crossed, and his usual scowl was more of a snarl. Something told Naruto that their supposed sensei was really annoyed about something for some reason. You idiot kids, Zabuza yelled, did you think about the fact that as your Kusa Genin, you've only got 1 instructor? Did you actually consider that you would all be summoning me at the same time? Do you have any idea how uncomfortable it is to be summoned in 3 different directions at the same bloody time? Not really, Sai said, smiling. Nor do we really care, Kimimaro cut in. This means we pass though, right? Haku asked. Thanks for coming all this way to tell us, Honda-sensei. Sakura said brightly. Zabuza had fallen into a long chain of successive swear words and ranting about brats who didn't listen to people and just what happened to them. By the way, Honda-sensei, Haku asked thoughtfully, we're here a day early, what do we do? Whadda ya think, femboy? Zabuza asked, get some beauty sleep. By the way, I've got something for you. Glaring at Haku as he was sure the boy had done something to warrant his hatred, Zabuza handed him what looked like a letter. Naruto didn't recognize the handwriting, and apparently neither did Haku, who looked mildly confused but took it anyways. He didn't open it, and Naruto couldn't blame him with the demon of the bloody mist glaring down at him like he would have liked nothing more than to gut him. Is this from someone that I know? Haku asked. Yes, Zabuza snarled. Something seemed to connect with Haku and all he said was ah. Sigh, Sasuke, and Naruto snickered. It looks like Psycho-sensei doesn't approve. Sai whispered. It looks like Psycho-sensei is going to have to deal with it, Kimimaro hissed. What did you call me, maggot? Zabuza snarled. Psycho-sensei, Sai said with a straight face. Naruto sometimes had to really admire him. He was either the bravest person that Naruto had ever seen or suicidal. It was hard to tell which one. Sai, you're either fearless or you have a death wish, Gaara said looking at Zabuza's face. Zabuza looked like he wasn't sure whether he wanted to laugh or just kill them all. It was a rather amusing expression to watch as the two urges fought one another for control. Finally he just snarled, you're a brave kid, brat. Something flickered once in his eyes that Naruto didn't catch. So, you're here to do what? Neji asked. Supposedly, I'm supposed to congratulate you on your passing this part of the exams and tell you that you're just getting started. Zabuza rolled his eyes. I thought so, Hinata said. So, keep your guard up, trust only one another, and all the other junk that you've had drilled into you since you first became real students, Zabuza said. Also, though I am still annoyed, but I had a good meal and drink and I'm feeling a little more generous than usual, I'm going to give you a warning, beware of sabotage or sabotage others. As long as it's not in the arena, it's perfectly legal. Ninja don't play by the rules, we make the rules play by us. Rules are subjective, Gaara said, stating one of Jiraiya's many quips, and everything is perfectly fair as long as you win. Zabuza seemed to approve of their attitude. Apparently, he hated idealism as much as he hated everything else. I'm supposed to lead you to your rooms if you're early, Zabuza told, so come on and don't waste my time. I've got better things to do. Like make out with his sword, Sasuke hissed to Naruto, who grinned. He wondered if it had a name. They followed Zabuza up a flight of stairs into a hallway with doors on either side. It looked like they were all temporary quarters or something like that. There was a door at the end of the hall that looked important, and Naruto assumed that it led outside or to where the next assignment was going to be given. All teams get their own rooms that have been reserved for you if you passed, Zabuza said, aren't you boys lucky? The boys all glared at him. We are not perverts. Gaara said angrily. Yeah, I guess most of you are a little young for puberty to properly set in, Zabuza smirked over at Haku and Kimimaro, and you don't get that privilege do you? Are you drunk? Kimimaro asked. A little. Get lost. Excuse me, a quiet voice said behind Zabuza. Naruto turned around to see Hayate, the sick-looking guy from Kainan. I'm going to have to ask you to quiet down a little, Hayate said, coughing a little, you see, there are already people here, and your students look tired as well. Thank you for leading them here. The dismissal was obvious. Zabuza glared and stormed off, mumbling a little about Sake and annoying kids. Naruto sighed and followed Sasuke and Sakura into their shared room. Tsunade would be furious. She was very strict about not having co-ed things like this. She said that it led to Jiraiyaism, and the boys were happy to comply. Naruto sat down on his pillow, thinking about when to call the meeting and noticed it. On the nightstand between his and Sasuke's bed, there was a note. Naruto picked it up and looked at it. It was written in an unfamiliar, scrawling, untidy hand, almost like it had been written by someone who wasn't used to writing, or was writing with their other hand. The message itself was what really caught Naruto's attention. It was simple, only one line, but that line sent a slight shiver down Naruto's spine. I'm on your side. Chapter 20, Part 2, Preliminaries. The meeting of Hakumei took place at a late hour in Team Databia's room, after making sure that there wasn't a hidden camera in there. There wasn't. Apparently, no one really wanted to see the genin dress and undress. The meeting was quick, it had to be. For one thing, teams kept coming in at all hours of the night, and they didn't want to bring too much attention to themselves. Thankfully, most people would think they were cooking up a strategy to use with one another the next day. Naruto allowed them to keep that delusion. The meeting itself was quick. Kimimaro described what they had found, and Naruto, with Sasuke and Sakura's interjections, described what happened in the forest. They also produced the paper with the message that Naruto had found. That produced a lot of discussion. So, it's either written by someone with terrible handwriting, or it was written by someone who's using their other hand, Niji said thoughtfully, so instead of saying who it was, let's work out who it wasn't. Sounds good, Haku agreed. I don't think that it was Kabuto-san. Me neither, Kimimaro and Niji both said at the same time. It wasn't Yumi, Sasuke supplied. Nope, Naruto agreed. So, that leaves us with nearly everyone else, Hinata's side, other than Kainen of course, since we know that they're on our side. So, basically, we have to wait until they reveal themselves to us, Sakura said. Sounds like it, Haku said thoughtfully. I hate waiting. Sai sighed. In the end it was decided to wait to see what happened and to keep their guards up. After all, they didn't even know if the note was genuine or a hoax created because someone was suspicious and wanted them to reveal themselves. By the way, Hinata said as they began to get ready to return to their own rooms, Takei, we're going to talk to Frog Face about Fuzzy Wuzzy when we get home. And don't you dare not tell us if you are worried about something. We're family. Family doesn't keep dark secrets. Naruto grinned a little bit at her. I'm fine, he said, really, there's nothing to worry about. When you get like that, you make me worry more, Hinata sighed, I swear. Really, Naruto repeated, it was just a bit of a shock. I haven't really had the time to think about Fuzzy since I was 7. When it came out it startled me. That's all. Remember this, Takei, Hinata said looking away a little bit, when you don't tell people what's wrong, they worry. Fuzzy is a big problem, but it's not as big of a problem as it could be. Let's talk to him about this later, and then we can figure out what happened. It's probably completely natural. It looks like the seal is designed to let out a little chakra anyways. Thanks, Rei. Naruto grinned. The others exchanged bored looks as Hinata blushed a little and Naruto looked a little confused. The looks were pretty obvious, this guy is so oblivious that it's disgusting. Morning was not a welcome thing. Naruto hadn't wanted to wake up after the effort from the meeting. He was tired, and the team in the room to his right was very loudly celebrating their success in the exam. Naruto had a feeling that it was the sound team that he had fought, but didn't bother to see if he was right. Naruto slept later than usual, but dragged himself up in time to catch breakfast before he missed it. It was a rather sorry breakfast, only a bowl of rice and some fish, but Naruto had long since learned not to complain about food when placed in front of him for free. He was surprised when the Chunin who was guarding the door for some reason that escaped Naruto told them that they would be summoned into the main room, which seemed to be where the orientation for the exams was held, at noon. That would be the official end of that part of the exams. Naruto would rather have it end at a better time, but he supposed that this way, he could rest and prepare himself for whatever was going to happen during the next part. Mostly, Naruto ended up playing shogi with Sasuke. Niji didn't want to play with him, since he couldn't really think of what to do with himself. If the next part involved fighting, he would just have to make sure that he didn't use any techniques that may be recognized as coming from Konoha. That was a problem, since most of the best techniques he had were either variants of the Kage Bunshin or things taught to him by Jiraiya that were very memorable, like Raise Non. Naruto would be limited, but then again, that limit would probably make him look like just another genin with slightly above average skills. That was what he wanted. Naruto wasn't the best shogi player in the world, and Sasuke managed to have his ego stroked a great deal before the bell to announce the noon meeting finally came. Naruto sat up with a sign of relief. Sasuke glowered a little as he packed up the board. Awful timing, he muttered. Only for you, Naruto sighed. I was getting tired of watching you destroy me over and over again with that same stupid smirk on your face like this was something new. You know that I can't play this game all that well. Then think and don't talk, Sasuke said, rolling his eyes. I've seen you come up with good strategies before. Only on the field, Naruto replied. This is completely different. Only in your head, Sasuke said. Haku stuck his head into the room where the two were. Are you ready? He asked. I heard someone say that the people who show up late get disqualified. What? Sasuke growled. I didn't hear that. Well, come on, Haku said, motioning them. Just leave the board. I don't think that anyone would want it anyways. Naruto, Sasuke, and Haku ran down the hall toward the door that Naruto had thought led to the orientation room. He was right. It was a large, stone room with a computer that seemed to be there to announce something. There were balconies that all surrounded a large clear area at the base of a statue of two hands performing a seal. There was already a large group of teams in that clear area. All three of them took their places with their respective teams. Sakura gave a reproving look to Naruto and Sasuke, and Neji and Kimimaro both hissed something at Haku, who looked apologetic and glanced over at Sasuke. Shogi nut, Neji whispered. Kimimaro looked at Neji in a slightly amused way. That came from you. I don't forget when a major tournament is going on just to play shogi, Neji replied. Kimimaro smirked a little. Sasuke glared over at them, but didn't say anything. He was trying to muster up what remained of his dignity and ignore them completely. Besides, there were other, far more important things happening. A set of doors that was in the opposite direction of the one they had come into opened, revealing the Godame Hokage along with a guard of Chiryunin and Jounin instructors from every village participating. It had been 5 years since Naruto had seen Danzu. Now, he stood in his Hokage robes of white trimmed with red and the traditional hat. His face was still wrapped in bandages, and he leaned on a cane. Part of Naruto was amazed that he looked so weak. The other was amazed that he didn't look like he had aged a single day. Danzu looked over the crowd of children with a completely unreadable expression on his face. His one eye was hard and sharp, and his grip was relaxed. Although he was watchful, Danzu didn't see a single person there as a threat to him. Just you wait, Naruto thought. Greetings all, Hayate said, coughing a little and smiling in a slightly sickly way. My name is Gecko Hayate, and I will be the examiner of this part of the exams. Before we discuss that, the Godame Hokage has a few words to say to you. Welcome, Danzu said calmly, walking up. All of you who have passed this part of the exam have proven that you have the ability to service on an extended mission. Congratulations. Yet, this is not the end, as many of you have most likely deduced. A Chiryunin is only a temporary step before reaching Jounin or Special Jounin. You have proven that you have the ability to survive against the elements and stress. Now you will be tested to see if you have the ability to survive against your fellow ninja. I will tell you each something. The Chiryunin exams are not a way to help with foreign relations, Danzu said with a thin smile. They are an organized form of war between all nations. Nothing more. That is why even nations who are enemies send their genin here. All other things said are pretty lies told to keep the daimyos and the civilians happy. The final exams are scheduled to take place in 1 month. This allows lords and nobles as well as businessmen from around the world to arrive and know who is participating. These lords enjoy betting on participants, and they are able to see promising talent that they will request from the genin's village in the future. This year is a unique one, as so many of you have managed to pass. Unfortunately for all of you, there is a maximum number of genin that can participate. There are far too many of you. As such, for the first time in years, we will be holding a preliminary round. You will be matched against one another in a one-on-one battle. The winner will proceed to the final exam. Furthermore, I declare all teams temporarily dissolved for the duration of the preliminaries. They will begin immediately. I give all who feel that they are not able to compete in this preliminary the chance to forfeit now, as we are not responsible if one of you who is too tired to fight is killed. This statement led to a very long and ominous silence as the participants digested this piece of information. Slowly, a few people raised their hands. One good thing about this was that those who had raised their hands were ushered off through another set of doors, probably to some underground passage or other way to get back into the main city of Konoha quickly. Naruto was sure that was something like that somewhere. Danzo wasn't going to want to fight his way through if he didn't have to. I see, Danzo said in an emotionless tone as those who had chosen to stay watched him apprehensively. Those of you who have chosen to stay, go up to the balcony, and this computer will randomly select your matches. Naruto filed up the flight of stairs and looked around to see who else had passed. The other grass team was there, talking to their sensei in quiet voices. Naruto doubted that he had ever seen a man quite that large and, well, ageless. He could have been anywhere from 15 to 20-something. That was by itself strange. Yumi, Shino, and Kiba had made it through and were talking to Kakashi, or rather Kiba was talking to Kakashi and Yumi and Shino were both nearby. The sand team had made it. Temari was looking over at Matsuri with a look that told him that it was no thanks to her that they had made it so far. The sound team had also managed to pass. They were talking to their sensei, and Naruto noticed that the one, Doso's, eyes met his once but he couldn't read the look. The girl who Niji had confronted in the exams was there, but her team seemed to have forfeited. The same was true for Sora. Naruto was hoping to get matched up against him from the first. Just because that smirk on his face was annoying. Naruto stood with Sakura and Sasuke as he waited for the computer to come up with the combinations. The computer had turned on and it seemed to be shuffling the names up and sorting through them very quickly to choose a random selection. Finally there was a pinging sound and two names appeared on the board. Inuzuka Kiba vs. Yuma. Oh yeah, Kiba punched one fist into the air. I'm up. Wait. Ah, I got a weak opponent. Come on, Akamaru, let's get this over with. Kiba had turned away from the others and was stomping down the stairs, grumbling a little about how he had wanted to fight Shino or maybe Sora or at least one of the tough-looking Kusunin. Naruto looked over at Kimimaro, who hadn't even turned a hair at Kiba's statement. He seemed more or less amused by the whole thing. Calmly, instead of using the stairs, Kimimaro jumped down, landing on his feet in a crouch and walking up to where Hayate waited. Kiba joined them a second later, giving Kimimaro a slightly confused look, but doing his best to look like he knew everything that was going on. This match is between Inuzuka Kiba of Konoha and Yuma of Kusa. There is no time limit for this battle, and all weapons are permitted. Before we start, are you sure you don't want to forfeit? Kiba asked. Kimimaro looked at Kiba thoughtfully. You know, he said, I was intending to go easy on you, but now, I think I'm going to take you a little more seriously than I had meant to. If only because you annoy me. Kiba started to growl a little in response to that. That mud kid's going to die, isn't he? Zabuza asked, coming up behind Naruto. I wouldn't say die, Sakura said thoughtfully, but his ego is going to be in shreds after this. Yuma looks as if he'll use his tongue as a mop for this arena. Sasuke nodded without saying anything. He seemed to be more interested in the actual match than giving a whole lot of commentary on it. Kimimiro's battles were usually interesting. Naruto heard something and looked over his shoulder to see Shino, Yumi, and Kakashi walking towards them. So, Kusunin, Yumi said softly to Sasuke, do you think that your friend will be able to survive an attack by a Konoha nin? We'll see, Sasuke said calmly. Shino said nothing. Hey, Yuma, Kiba said, I have a great idea. The loser has to address the winner as Sama and bow to them. What do you say? If that's the stake you want to play. Kimimaro said, personally, I would have had something more like the loser has to tell the winner all of their teammates' abilities, but they're your stakes. Begin. Hayate called. Kiba wasted no time on further speech. He charged Kimimaro with the first punch, but only got air as Kimimaro evaded him. Kiba punched again, but met only air. Stop running away and fight me. Kiba growled, jumping up into the air and aiming a kick at Kimimiro's chest. Kimimaro stood his ground this time, and Kiba's grin turned into a look of shock, pain, and horrified disgust when Kimimiro's ribcage came out and caught his foot like a trap. Kiba twisted his foot, but it remained where it was. How, Kiba stuttered out. Unorthodox, aren't I? Kimimaro asked, a smirk on his face. This is the Kekii Genkai of my family, Inyazuka-san. You've seen it before once. Don't you remember? Naruto noticed that Danzo had straightened where he stood, his eyes on Kimimaro, and had a pretty good idea of what he was thinking. This kid had just displayed a Kekii Genkai that was thought to have been extinct for a long time, and the family itself had been killed off. How was it that someone had inherited it? How many other people had it? Also, Kiri had kept the power of its clans a careful secret. That would mean that Danzo had no idea what attacks Kimimaro could use or just how strongly the Kekii Genkai had manifested itself. Is that the Shikatsu Myaku? Shino asked. Don't be stupid, Yumi said dismissively. The entire Kagaya clan was killed in an attack on Kiri, everyone knows that. Also, the bloodline had become tainted with outside bloodlines, so the power had died out. Yumi-san, I'm sorry, but it appears to be the Shikatsu Myaku, Shino insisted. I don't know how, but it seems that one of them survived and with the full power of the bloodline. Meanwhile Kiba was still attempting to wrest his leg free, until finally Kimimaro allowed him to. Kimimaro was now in a fighter's crouch. It looked like he had decided to stop playing with him and truly defeat him. That hand. Kiba breathed. Yes, that was me, Kimimaro admitted in a careless tone. I wanted someone to experiment on. You have an ego problem. I thought it was perfect. Now, enough games. Come at me with everything you have. Kiba growled, you're going to regret saying that, freak. Come on Akamaru, let's turn this guy into dog food. That was quite possibly the worst tough statement that I've heard, Sasuke commented. Akamaru jumped back onto Kiba's head and Kiba gave it a small pill of some kind. The effect was instantaneous. The usually small, white dog began to grow and darken into a brown color. Also, its teeth, which had been unimpressive, had become long and vicious looking. The monster version of Akamaru growled at Kimimaro, who seemed to be studying it and forming a plan of some kind. Shikyaku no Jutsu. Kiba called, falling to all fours as his nails and teeth grew longer. Kimimaro extended his hands in a style that Naruto was well accustomed to. This was Kimimiro's weakest attack, but it served as his only long-range one where he didn't show off his final attack or his more powerful ones. Naruto had a feeling that Kimimaro wasn't going to show everything, and was trying to only use as few of his attacks as he could. After all, Danzo didn't know just what Kimimaro could do, so he had the element of surprise. Even if they knew that he had the Shikatsu Myaku, no one in Konoha knew how to fight it or what its weaknesses were. In Naruto's opinion, Kimimaro was sort of the Shikatsu Myaku's last gamble. He had pretty much been given all the powers that the bloodline could offer in the bloodline's attempt to survive. If Kimimaro died, that bloodline went with him, but the chances of him dying weren't too good. Teshi Senden, Kimimaro said calmly. Kiba didn't understand what Kimimaro was doing until it was almost too late and he had been shot. It was also thanks to the fact that Kimimaro didn't have the greatest aim when he was trying to do a general sweep, so Kiba got to see one of the bones hit the wall about 3 mm from his head. Both Kiba and Akamaru started to run towards Kimimaro, running in a zigzag pattern trying not to get hit by the bullets. Kimimaro grazed his shoulders a few times, but Kiba mostly was unscathed as he closed in. Once they were close, they both began their attacks, biting and scratching at Kimimaro, but were finally repelled by a barrage of bones. Kiba jumped back, panting a little bit, but his eyes lit up when he saw that there was a cut on Kimimiro's arm that was bleeding. Heh, I told you that Konoha nin are more powerful than Kusan nin, Kiba grinned. Next to my ultimate techniques, your little bones are nothing. Kimimaro laughed softly. What's so funny? Kiba yelled. Kimimaro raised his hand. This little cut, does it make you happy? He asked, still smirking. Only an inexperienced ninja would refer to a technique that didn't kill their opponent in one blow as their ultimate technique. Kimimaro charged, not using his bone structure yet, just simple taijutsu. There is no such thing as an ultimate technique, Kimimaro said, sending a roundhouse kick that Kiba blocked but was knocked back. Akamaru charged and jumped, aiming a bite for Kimimiro's head, but he dodged. Kimimiro's speed matched both of theirs exactly. Hakumei took a large bite out of air and skidded to the ground, slightly confused. True. Ninja. Eyes. Always. Growing, Kimimaro said between punches, always. Learning. Stronger. Techniques. And. Never. Allowing. Themselves. To. Stop. Kiba had blocked most of Kimimiro's punches and had jumped back, landing next to Hakumei. He had started to really pant, and for the first time was really taking his opponent seriously. He snarled a little bit. You don't know anything about strength. Kiba snarled, I promised myself that I would be the strongest there was. No, stronger, and you're not going to stop me. I'm curious, Kimimaro asked, still in his crouch, why do you think you have to be so strong? Family pride? To bring glory to your village? Neither. Kiba said, because you're an orphan, you might understand. What would you do if someone killed one of your friends? They would be dead before they had taken a step, Kimimaro said in a cold voice. Well, I wasn't there. Kiba yelled, one of my friends was killed by foreign ninja when he was just a kid. Yeah, he was weak, slow, and sometimes I doubted the guy's sanity, but he was still my friend. Naruto wasn't sure whether he should be angry, or be happy, or just hit Kiba for being stupid. What was he thinking, buying into everything Danzo said just because that one of his friends had been involved? Surely he wouldn't have acted like that. Naruto would have thought out the things he was being told. Particularly when the attack on IWA revealed that no one knew anything about that assassination. Then again, that was what Tsunade and Jiraiya had taught him maybe without them. So I decided that I would find the people who kidnapped them and kill them myself, and no ninja from a washed-up, has-been village is going to stop me. Kiba continued, Hakumei, let's go. Useless, Kimimaro whispered. Hakumei jumped close to Kiba and there was a puff of smoke. Jujin Bunshin. Kiba's voice yelled. The smoke cleared and Kimimaro now faced two replicas of Kiba. Both were grinning at him and panting a little bit. Kimimaro did not appear all that fazed by two Kibas any more than he had been by one. He simply changed his stance a little bit. Naruto leaned forwards, looking at Sakura and Sasuke. They were doing the same thing. Naruto knew that stance really well. It meant that he was prepared to fight a large group of opponents such as Naruto's Kage Bunshin. It was also a technique that didn't show a great deal of Kimimiro's real power. For this kind of a fight, it was perfect. If you think you're so tough, you're going to face my most powerful technique, Kiba said smirking. I hope it's better than your last one. Kimimaro muttered. You'll see for yourself, Kiba said proudly, Gachuga. Kiba and Hakumei seemed to spin rapidly like two drills and moved directly for Kimimaro. Kimimaro raised his arms. Karamatsu no Mai, Kimimaro said calmly. From all over his body, bones shot up. The drills moved back, but attacked again from another angle. Kimimaro began to spin, the bones flashing sinisterly. There was a howl of pain, and one of the attackers fell back, bleeding and changing back into Hakumei. The other drill whirled around and attempted to catch Kimimaro from the back, only to meet another bone that dug into his shoulder. Kimimaro stopped and calmly looked at Kiba, his eyes appraising him. Then the bone shot back into him, and Kiba fell to the ground in a heap. I avoided puncturing your lungs, Kimimaro said, but there is no way that you could kill the man who killed your friend. What do you know? Kiba hissed. Kimimaro calmly put his foot on Kiba's head. I know that right now I could kill you, and there's nothing you could do about it. If you were defeated by me, you couldn't possibly win against someone who was Umbu level or higher. I can still fight, Kiba growled. I see your partner means nothing to you then, Kimimaro said, his eyes on Hakumei, and extending a hand in the position of Teshi Senden towards him. The dog was bleeding badly. It struggled to get up, but it was unable to do so. When he noticed Kimimiro's eyes on him, Hakumei growled, but it was a weak, tired sound. There was no way that he was going to manage to escape Kimimiro's attack. Kiba's eye flickered back and forth between Kimimaro and Hakumei, as the debate took place in his mind. Finally he gave in. All right, you win, he gasped, just don't hurt Hakumeru. Inyazuka Kiba has forfeited the match, Hayate said calmly, the winner is Yuma. All of Hakumei cheered loudly. Weakling, Yumi said calmly, letting his feelings for his dog get the better of him. He should have continued and bought a new dog. Shino said nothing. So then he would have been beaten and his dog killed as well. Suzuki asked, Yuma crushed him. Because he cared too much about his mutt, and your friend didn't have anything to tie him down, Yumi said calmly, people are only at their strongest when they have nothing to limit them like a bomb. That is why Root is so effective in Konoha. I assume you have heard how they destroyed IWA. Naruto had to disagree. The most dangerous that he had seen Kimimaro was the one time that he had thought that they were going to be killed. The same went for all of them. Alone they could be picked off, but together they were a force to be reckoned with. Hakumei usually worked as an entire unit, unlike other groups, who were usually divided. Yumi had a point that people who didn't have any connections to anything were dangerous. They were also weaker since an opponent could know for a fact that unless it benefited the team members, a Root team could be broken up and couldn't rely on each other. Also, Kimimiro's mother, whoever she was, had named him well. He had completely dominated that match. Kimimaro walked up the stairs as Kiba was taken away by some medic nins along with Hakumeru. Kiba didn't really understand what had happened. It had been like everything that he had done had been completely useless against that opponent. Where had he made a mistake? He had done everything the way that he should have, but it hadn't been enough. What was worse was that Hakumeru was very badly hurt. Kiba felt even worse than if he had simply been defeated. He had caused his partner to be hurt as well. That Yuma guy had made it clear that if he had wanted to, he could have killed him and Hakumeru. Naruto would have laughed at him so hard he would have started hyperventilating, then he would have said how he would have crushed Yuma with his awesome skills if he had been matched up against him. Naruto always did have a huge head and not a whole lot of sense. Kiba buried his face in his pillow. Yuma had been right. He didn't have the power to defeat the people who had murdered Naruto. He couldn't even fight against a stupid grass nin. Kiba. Kiba turned around to look at Hakumeru. He had been bandaged up, but he was still tired and weak from the use of the soldier pill, which was very draining, and the loss of blood. He wagged his tail a little bit. You did really great, you know. He totally crushed us, Kiba sighed, and we made ourselves look weak in front of Danzusama. How are we going to advance looking like that? I thought we did pretty good. Hakumeru sounded a little upset, or maybe just hurt. Kiba couldn't tell, and that bothered him. Usually he was in tune with almost all of Hakumeru's feelings. Hey, Hakumeru, Kiba muttered, I'm sorry, I actually considered letting that guy kill you so I could win. I don't deserve to be your partner. But you didn't let him. You forfeited instead of letting me die. Yeah, I guess I did. Kiba was sometimes amazed by Hakumeru's loyalty. Well, Yumi's right. I don't have the willingness to make sacrifices to be a true ninja, but I guess I'll have to redefine what a ninja is along with you. After all, we're partners, and if the traditional ninja can't have a partner, we've got to change that. We'll make our own nindo. Hakumeru wagged his tail in agreement. If there's something in your way of being the best, knock it down. We got beat because I didn't think enough about my partner. I've got to get stronger and build my partnership. You'd agree, wouldn't you, Naruto? Kimimaro got some pats on the back from Hakumei as congratulations on a job well done. He looked rather pleased with himself as he smirked at the others. Shino and Yumi, along with Kakashi, had moved back to where they had been before. Naruto noticed that Kakashi was leading them and Shino looked a little reluctant to go. You took too long, Niji told him. I wanted to enjoy myself while I trampled his ego. Kimimaro admitted. You're sadistic, Hinata sighed. Only mildly so, Kimimaro said, I don't enjoy hurting people, just messing with them a little bit. You have to admit that his face was funny when my ribs came out. Naruto grinned and had to agree, but felt the eyes of Danzu on them. He and the other former Konoha runaways would have to be really careful if they didn't want to be caught. The next match will begin immediately, Hayate called out. Once again, the computer began sorting through the names of the participants and Naruto and the others waited. Some of the genin leaned forwards hopefully, while others held back and watched the screen with a sort of calm anticipation. The only one who didn't seem to be looking forwards to the announcing of the next match was the sand girl, Matsuri. She just looked a little on the sick side. Finally, the pinging sound rang again and two names appeared. Yamanaka Ino vs. Kankuro. Ino looked over at Kankuro, who smirked at her, and bit her lip. That guy's just flat creepy looking. Naruto heard her whisper to her teammates, I really would rather not fight him. It's a pain, but that's the rules, Shikamaru grumbled, at least I don't have to fight now. So selfish, Ino whispered, sometimes I can't believe they put you on a team with me. It's alright, Chuji said, we don't mind. Ino glared over at Chuji and stormed off down the stairs. Naruto knew for a fact that there was a very good reason that that team had been placed together. First of all, they were a tribute to their dads, who had been a pretty famous team, and now were drinking buddies and had probably timed it so that their wives had kids in the same year, and the other was that their families were all officially critical of Danzu. Also, Naruto knew for a fact that all three heads were members of Kainan. They weren't openly against him or anything, but they were the only critics that Danzu faced. It was natural that he would put the children together under a teacher that he knew was loyal. Naruto wouldn't have kept them together though. It seemed the Danzu underestimated the amount of strength that people could get from one another. Or maybe he didn't care too much. It was very hard for Naruto to tell with Danzu. That guy gave off almost no real feelings. It was creepy. Had Sai been like that? Well, this is a nice breakup, Niji said. Who do you think is going to win? Ino, Sakura said in a dead tone. Really? Sasuke asked. Yeah, I think I remember reading about that family, Sakura said thoughtfully. She might look like nothing more than a slightly sleazy girl with a loud mouth, but if she knows her family's moves, she's pretty dangerous. Niji said thoughtfully, this match might be more interesting than I thought. I hope so, Sai said. I really don't like watching guys beat up helpless girls. I never saw you jump in to save us, Sakura pointed out. That's because you're not helpless. Does he have a thing for weaker women? Naruto hissed to Sasuke. Apparently, I'm not complaining though, for a while I was worried that he wasn't interested at all. I think Sensei was just as worried. He'll be thrilled. Can we please change the subject? Haku asked. It's starting. Hinata leaned on the ledge. This match is between Yamanaka Ino of Konoha and Kankuro of Suna. As before, there is no time limit and all weapons are permissible. Begin. Ino wasted no time. She dashed towards him, feinted, and tried to attack from the side. Kankuro matched her movements exactly, blocking her punches, but not making any moves of his own. Naruto watched for a while. This didn't seem right for Kankuro for some reason. He had struck Naruto as being more like him and wanting to get the whole fight over with as soon as possible. He seemed to be reading her movements and growing accustomed to them, but what was he waiting for? In a match of strength, he would easily win. What was he waiting for? Naruto watched, trying to remember what Konohamaru had said about what Kankuro did. He played with dolls, and Kankuro had called them his weapons. What was a weapon that could be thought of like a doll? Hey, Shinta, Naruto called Gaara, isn't Suna famous for having ninjutsu that used puppets? Gaara nodded, it's one of Suna's distinctive traits. Some of their best ninja were puppet users. I believe that there are a lot of laws about what you're allowed to do now though. I remember reading that someone thought that it would be a bright idea to use human bodies as puppets. That's disgusting, Haku remarked. Kankuro seemed to have either had enough of being beaten up by a girl or had read her all that he wanted to. At any rate, he punched out, forced Ino back, and jumped towards her while she was still a little unsteady, grabbing her long ponytail in one hand. You're not too bad at taijutsu, he said, but this isn't going to be a taijutsu battle anymore. Let's use our real techniques. Ino smirked. You're going to regret saying that. She said, but if that's what you want, and you asked so nicely, I guess a lady like me has no choice but to agree. With one motion, Ino had cut off the chunk of hair that Kankuro was holding, and she spun around to face him as Kankuro let go of the hair in disgust. But now I am mad, Ino said crossly, you made me cut my precious hair. Girls who fight shouldn't have hair that long anyways, Kankuro shrugged, don't they teach you anything? Hair's a target cutie. Heh, it's also a weapon. Ino shouted. Kankuro's smirk changed into a look of surprise as he looked down at his feet, which seemed to be straining but unable to move. He tried a few times, but it seemed that nothing was working. What's this? He asked in shock. That, my friend, is a technique I thought up, Ino said proudly, there's no way you can escape from me now. Miss Gorgeous is pretty good. Sai said thoughtfully. Better than I thought that she would be, Niji admitted. Ino placed her hands so that she was looking at Kankuro through a circle made from her thumb and middle and index fingers and said calmly but very softly, Shintenshin no Jutsu. Ino crumbled to the ground in what looked like a faint. So her great technique is to faint on command? Suzuki asked. I hope not, Kimimaro said rolling his eyes, who would come up with such a stupid technique? You're not listening, Hinata reproved them. Kankuro was completely still for a moment, and then started to laugh a little bit. Slowly, Ino got off of the ground clutching her head and moaning a little in pain. She looked up at Kankuro in a confused way and gasped a little. Slowly, the clay that covered Kankuro's head began to break apart to show a completely mechanical face and the strange wrapped-up thing on his back came undone in order to reveal the real Kankuro. What? Ino gasped out. This is my Kugutsu no Jutsu, Kankuro smirked, you really had rotten luck getting matched up against the only guy that attack wouldn't work on. Tough luck. Do you surrender or do you want me to use Karasu? I surrender, Ino grumbled, I can't fight with this headache. You heard the lady, Kankuro said to Hayate. Yamanaka Ino has surrendered. The winner is Kankuro. Hayate said calmly. So she possessed people? Naruto asked. Yeah, and apparently, you can't possess an inanimate object. Sakura said. Naruto would keep that in mind, just in case he ever had to go up against one of the Yamanaka clan. So, that was what Kano Amaru meant. Naruto had thought so, but he just hadn't been completely sure up until now. Actually, Naruto didn't think that it looked much like a doll, and he was sure that it didn't just look nasty. Gaara looked a little troubled, but Naruto didn't ask him if there was anything the matter. It might have something to do with the fact that Kankuro was his brother or something. He would ask later, if he had the chance. So, Konoha had lost twice. Naruto was feeling a little more calm now that things were showing themselves that he had nothing much to worry about. The computer began its shuffle through names again, and Naruto watched boredly. He wasn't confident that they wouldn't face any trouble, but things were looking much easier. There was a ping, and Naruto looked up to see the two names, and felt a rush of worry clench his stomach. Uchiha Yumi vs. Emi. Anko tapped her foot impatiently as she waited for Irika. He had better be grateful for all the time that she had wasted watching the stupid exam just so that he could see if his little favorite would be alright. But that wasn't the reason that she was there. From what she had seen of him in that little scuffle with the sound team, he could take care of himself, and when he couldn't, he traveled in a pack to eliminate anything bad that might happen. It was clever, but somewhat disturbing. It had been a long time since she had seen kids that powerful. Anko was actually against the academy. It, in her view, actually made the students weaker because those who were naturally better had to slow down for those who were naturally worse. She knew that her thoughts were cruel when it came to the actual children, since 5-year-olds shouldn't be fighting wars anyways. The Uchiha had proven that with Itachi, but as war continued, Anko wondered if at a certain age, those with talent should have been trained differently. Irika would disagree. For all that he now seemed to have split personalities, Irika was firm on the notion that children should be allowed to have a childhood. Perhaps it was Anko's own lack of one that made her so cold. She had apprenticed to Orochimaru at a very young age, and that had changed a lot about her. The thought of that monster made her lip curl. She had thought so highly of him once. She would have been willing to do anything for him. Once, he had had that ability. Orochimaru had been able to inspire loyalty and trust in others. When he had started to ignore her training slightly and act strangely, Anko had written it off. When he had placed the cursed seal on her, Anko's first thoughts were to justify him, to find any reason why he had changed so quickly and so dramatically. Anko hadn't wanted to believe that someone she had liked had used her like that, and she would have taken any excuse to believe that either it wasn't him or it wasn't his fault. Finally, the truth had been too obvious to ignore. Orochimaru had hid his true personality from everyone, and when it was advantageous to him, he had showed it. What was amusing was that it wasn't even that advantageous to him. Maybe he had just gotten bored or something. There were soft footsteps and Anko turned around to greet Irika. "You're late," she said, crossing her arms. "What are you taking lessons from Kakashi? Did you get lost on the road of life?" She stopped when she realized that this was Irika's annoying little friend Mizuki, a white-haired, smooth-talking ninja who Anko trusted as much as the average poisonous spider. She just got a really strange vibe off of him, and Anko had learned to trust the vibes that she got off of people. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mitarashi-san," Mizuki said. "Were you waiting for Irika?" "No, I just like standing around here looking bored," Anko said. Mizuki laughed in a nervous kind of way and scratched the back of his head. "You're a funny person, Anko-chan. What was it about this guy that got on her nerves?" He had this irritating way of constantly being nice and charming, and it set her teeth on edge. Seriously, what guy was as even-tempered as this one? Even Irika could get angry, and his calmness and sweetness generally made her feel a little more normal than usual. This one just made her feel ready to kill someone, preferably him. "Get lost, Mizuki," Anko said. "What are you doing in Irika's office anyways?" "I was looking for some files on a few students that I think he had," Mizuki told her, completely ignoring her rudeness. "I want to know just how many rules Kano Amaru-kun had broken so I can give a good report to Asuma." "Oh, yeah, like he was interested in what that little brat did." Anko knew for a fact that Mizuki had nothing to do with the troublemakers. Or maybe it was just because Kano Amaru happened to be the Hokage's grandson. Who would name their kid Kano Amaru anyways? No wonder he was happily on the path to being a delinquent. Anko had heard that Hyuga Hanabi had beaten the snot out of the kid for stalking her and showing her some horror that she refused to speak of. "Yeah, well, do it some other time," Anko said, suddenly struck by inspiration. "I have business with Irika-kun." She winked at the end of that sentence. Anko knew perfectly well that most people assumed that she was fast. They also assumed that she didn't have a shirt on underneath her armor. Idiots. Armor was only so good. The more clothes the better. Anko had to admit, she didn't mind messing with people's dirty minds or presenting what looked like an easy target. In this case, it was going to come in handy. Mizuki would come to the dirtiest assumption his little mind could see, and he would go crawling back to whatever hole he had crawled out of with some R-rated fantasies to tell everyone. Then her trips to Irika's office would seem perfectly normal. She was such a genius. Mizuki's face went red, and he made some stuttered excuses and left quickly. He was shy. Anko made a mental note of that. Could he really be this pathetic? No. Therefore he was suspicious. "Anko-chan," Irika asked walking in through the office, "is there a reason why Mizuki was in here?" "He said he was looking for files on Kano Amaru for some reason," Anko smirked. "I got rid of him. Now it's just the two of us." Anko edged a little closer. "Would you please not do that?" Irika asked. "It's rather disturbing." But it was so fun," Anko grinned. "Did you know your friend was a closet pervert? Like glasses-kun. You get too much pleasure out of doing that," Irika sighed. "What's more ironic, is that you've never even dated let alone dash." Anko hit him very lightly. "Who cares, of course, if you're interested. When did we go from you're trying to feed me to your snake to this?" "I don't know, I guess some time of working together made me realize that you really weren't a pervert." Anko grinned. "At any rate, I'm here for a reason. Jiraiya-sama gave me this to show to Kainan individually." Anko took out a message capsule that was used for hawks and such, and she opened both the bottom and top flaps, coming up with 2 messages. The first was to Jiraiya, but the second was what had caught Anko's attention the most. "Ero Senin. Yes, that does happen to be your code name with us. Deal with it or harass Shibuya. I really don't care which. Anyways, I have noticed that in the exams there was a group who claimed to be from Kusa like us. However, They showed no sign of being confused by our presence and made a claim similar to ours as a reason why that did not know us. Enclosed is a reply to an inquiry that I sent to Kusa, giving them a description of the genin and asking if they are what they claim. Please know that I wrote this with the original inquiry and, since I have no means of receiving the letter in private, used one of your birds. I'm sure you're annoyed, but I'm also sure you'll live with it if this information tells you what I think it will. Haka. That Haka kid is pretty interesting, Anko said with a smirk at Irika. Now, look at what he dug up. Irika picked up the other letter and read through it. If this is true. And it is, Anko supplied. Then we have a team running around from some random place that we don't know about, Irika said softly. No one from Kusa matches those descriptions, but that names are the same as the genin who went missing with their sensei. It looks like they killed those genin and stole the identification papers. But why? I think we should be informing the others right about now, Anko said calmly. You're right. A moment later, the office was abandoned. Chapter 21, Part 2, Metal. Naruto didn't know why, but he felt a sinking feeling as he looked at the computer. He looked over at Sakura. She was looking over at Yumi with a thoughtful expression. She was twirling one piece of hair in her finger, and seemed deep into whatever thoughts were going through her mind. Wish me luck, Sakura said with a grin. Good luck, Naruto said, be careful. I'm always careful, Sakura sniffed but was grinning, that's why I'm so good. Seriously, Emi, Sasuke grumbled. Ah, are you guys worried about me? Sakura smiled. I don't trust her, Sasuke growled, finish her from the start. Sakura didn't say anything to that, but really, she didn't have to. Sakura knew that, but there was a problem. All of Sakura's real attacks had Tsunade's fingerprints all over them. If she were to use them with Danzo looking right at them, he would get suspicious. That and her pink hair would give her away. She had to fight with a handicap that Yumi didn't have. Yumi and Sakura both walked down to the area and stood facing one another with unreadable expressions. This match is between Uchiha Yumi of Konoha and Emi of Kusa. As in other matches there is no time limit. You may begin, Hayate said calmly. Both girls attacked at the same time, throwing kunai and deflecting them. Sakura dashed forwards, a punch aimed, but Yumi jumped back, throwing two more kunai which were deflected. It looked like Yumi wasn't going to let Sakura get anywhere near her. If you're not going to use a real attack then I will, Yumi said calmly, her hands forming a pattern that was extremely familiar to her. Katon, Gukaku no Jutsu, she said calmly, blowing out an enormous ball of flame that sped towards Sakura. It was only Sakura's long training with Sasuke that allowed her to dodge it in time and throw a barrage of kunai, all of them with bags attached to them so that what looked like paper and cherry blossoms were floating in the air. Pathetic, Yumi mumbled, dodging away and slicing the bags to pieces with a pair of kunai. Do you think you can defeat me with such a basic technique? Gunpowder packet filled bags with flower blossoms to hide the smell and an exploding tag couldn't possibly work. Did your village teach you anything? Who said anything about gunpowder? Sakura asked, tilting her head. Look around you. For the first time, Yumi seemed to notice that the little pieces of paper were really tiny exploding tags that Sakura had placed in the bag floating along with the petals. Because they were smaller than the usual type, Yumi must not have recognized them. Yumi's eyes widened fractionally, and she began to create a pattern of seals. Sakura Fubuki no Jutsu. Sakura called, throwing a kunai with an exploding tag attached to it towards Yumi. The explosion was ear-splitting. Even Sakura was knocked backwards in the blast. She regained her footing and stood braced, but there was a smirk on her face. That smirk turned to a look of surprise when she saw the metal dome where Yumi had once been. It dissolved, and Yumi stood, her hands in a seal, and expressionless. Kinzokutate no Jutsu, Yumi said calmly, a technique using both earth and fire elements to create a shield. It is unfortunate that it can only last for one attack. You've actually made me use something real. I must admit, I'm mildly impressed. Sakura replied with something that she had learned from Tsunade while she was suffering from a sake-induced headache and Jiraiya had been harassing her. You know, I like her, Kyoko, who was standing close enough for Naruto to hear, said thoughtfully, but I don't think she's going to win. Too bad. Sakura made a series of hand seals. Genwaku Sakura no Jutsu. Sakura said, sounding angry. No wonder, Naruto thought, these attacks were ones she hadn't used in years. When Sakura was younger she had made a bunch of techniques that had something to do with cherry blossoms, but most of them were weak or just silly looking. Sakura had to rely on those right now, when they weren't really that much help. Emi shouldn't have done that, Sai said. Why? Gaara asked. Didn't you see her fight with that group of missing nin? Sai asked. One of them trapped her and her team in a genjutsu that couldn't break, but she didn't seem too hindered by the limited visibility that the situation created. This girl has a thing with cherry blossoms, doesn't she? Ren asked. The weakest female character usually uses those kinds of techniques against the boss. Sasuke looked like he wanted to strangle him. The field changed completely, even the onlookers, who usually weren't able to see a genjutsu, could see it. Yumi was surrounded by what looked like hundreds of falling cherry blossoms, making it almost impossible to actually see anything. Sakura dashed forwards into the illusion, her fist raised, but Yumi jumped back again, seemingly able to navigate the genjutsu. If she could only get one punch in. Hinata mumbled. I know, Naruto growled, and so does Yumi. She's making sure that Emi can't get anywhere near her. But she's a short-range type too, isn't she? Haku asked, wouldn't that make it impossible for her to attack as well? I wouldn't be so sure of that, Sai said, watching the whole fight. Just because she can fight short-range doesn't mean she's a short-range fighter. Look at me. Also, Kimimaro added, we haven't seen her use anything other than the shield. It looks to me like she's purposely wearing Emi down. Sakura continued attacking, and Yumi continued to back up until she seemed satisfied with something. She dropped a smoke bomb, which covered the entire arena. When the smoke cleared, Yumi was a good distance from Sakura, holding a metal-tipped whip in her hand. It would have been better for you to have surrendered, Yumi said calmly. Let's begin. Yumi flicked her arm and the whip shot out towards Sakura. She dodged, jumping to the left with a bit of a smirk. You have to be faster than that, she yelled. Sakura's smirk turned to shock when the whip changed direction and homed in on her, gashing her leg. Sakura landed back in a crouch, holding one leg. It was bleeding badly. What? Sakura hissed. Kinzoku Shiai no Jutsu, Yumi said, smirking, it lets me control where my whip goes. Shall we continue? She flicked her wrist again, and Sakura started to jump back away from it. The problem was that with the wound in her foot, Sakura wasn't as fast as she had been, and Naruto noticed the whip's tip was actually stretching. Sakura seemed to notice it as well, since she was starting to try to move faster. If that's a genin, I'll take a nap right now, Gaara muttered. Yumi flicked her wrist one final time, and the whip was aimed straight for Sakura, or rather, her neck. Sakura didn't have time to dodge, and she was already in midair. She only had time to raise one hand to the level of her eyes as the whip wrapped itself around her neck and her wrist. The fact that Sakura had her wrist there, allowed her to breathe. It was bleeding, but there was a small smile on her lips. Somewhat impressive, Yumi said softly, so you managed to keep yourself from being killed. She tightened the rope, and there was a sick crack as Sakura's wrist broke. Sakura didn't scream, but her gritted her teeth in pain and closed her eyes. Now, Yumi took a step forwards, you really should scream. Bow down and beg for mercy, and you might find me to be generous. If not, I can continue this for hours. The whip tightened again for emphasis, and Sakura bit down hard on her lip until blood flowed. She glared at Yumi. Do it, she snarled. Such bravery is foolish. I gave you a chance to preserve your life that did not endanger your loyalty to your village. Only a fool wouldn't take it. She continued tightening the whip. You should have forfeited when you knew that you were matched against the elite. Did you honestly believe that some low-born child who has no clan to call her own would be a match for a child of the greatest of all bloodlines? I did not even need to activate the Sharingan to fight you. Weak. Sasuke was starting to shake with rage. I'll kill you slowly, girl. Yumi tightened the whip again and a small groan escaped Sakura. This match is over, Hayate said, finally deciding to get involved. Emi can no longer continue this fight. The winner is Uchiha Yumi. Yumi whirled on him, and for the first time, Naruto saw a true emotion on her face, rage. "Stay out of this, you pathetic excuse for a ninja," she snarled. Before she could continue her torture, a kunai whizzed past Yumi's face, barely missing. "Darn, I missed," Sasuke said calmly. He had jumped into the arena and was holding two other kunai. "You heard him, Uchiha. The match is over. If you don't leave, I'll make you." For a moment, Sasuke and Yumi stared at one another, and Naruto got the feeling that Sasuke was trying hard not to activate the Sharingan. Naruto could almost feel the tension between them. In the meantime, medics had taken advantage of the situation and were releasing the semi-conscious girl from the whip that was digging into her wrist and neck and laying her on a stretcher. Kimimaro jumped down and looked back up at the others. "I'm going with her," he said. "Give me the blow-by-blow later." Naruto nodded and looked over at Sasuke and Yumi. They hadn't said anything yet, and they seemed to be unaware of anything else. Finally Sasuke moved, taking out one kunai. He cut his hand. Holding out the hand, he touched some of the blood with his finger, and wrote something on his arm. "Uchiha Yumi," Sasuke said calmly, "I swear by this blood that I will have my revenge for her. Every drop of blood that you're spilled will be repaid 10 times over. I denounce you, Uchiha Yumi, you and your entire family as hypocrites and murderers. From this day forth, I and my children will never eat with you and yours. I arm myself against you." "I denounce you, Masaru," Yumi replied, "as a fool. From this time forth, I and my children will never eat with you and yours. I and my clan see you as our enemy." For a moment longer, they stared at one another, and then the computer began to work again. There was the now familiar pinging sound, and Naruto looked up to see the two names on the screen. Masaru vs. Abumizaku. Sasuke smirked a little as Yumi walked away. She ignored the comments of Shino. "I believe that you went too far," and settled down to watch. Naruto could tell that from the way that Sasuke was tensed. He was mad. In fact, Zaku might not live to tell the tale of what happened when you had to fight against Sasuke when he was in Avenger mode. Sasuke had only once gone into this frame of mind, and Naruto had been slightly intimidated by it. He was just glad that it hadn't been directed at him. It had been when they were younger and a thief had nearly killed Neji. Sasuke had all but gone berserk. Naruto basically considered it a word to the wise not to get him into that frame of mind. Sasuke seemed willing to do anything to achieve that revenge. Hopefully, Sasuke wouldn't activate the Sharingan right there with Danzo staring at him to see what he would do when he was mad. Sasuke and Zaku faced one another, and Hayate began his announcement. "This battle is between Masaru of Kusa and Abumizaku of Oto. All previous rules apply." Hayate seemed to be tired of giving the same rules time after time. "You may begin." Zaku looked like he was about to attack, but before he had even moved, Sasuke was right behind him. Sasuke had grabbed both of his arms before Zaku could react and had pulled them towards him, placing one foot on his back. "You seem pretty proud of your arms," Sasuke remarked. "You remind me a lot of someone, so I'll make you a deal. If you surrender now, I'll walk away. If you don't, I swear I'll take your arms from their sockets, or maybe I'll just snap your back." Sasuke pulled a little for emphasis, and Zaku groaned a little. He bit his lip and looked backwards slightly. One looking into Sasuke's eyes told him that he was dead serious. They were empty and dead. The kind of eyes that a shark had before it killed. Alright. Zaku snarled, "I give." Hayate seemed to be completely unsurprised by Sasuke's sudden show of power. "Abumizaku has surrendered, the victor is Masaru," he said, calmly. Sasuke walked up to where Hakumei stood and glared at all of them. Naruto Saida just shook his head. While Sasuke should have held back, Naruto couldn't really blame him. Also, Sasuke hadn't used any techniques, he had just forced Zaku to surrender using speed and intimidation. Danzo wasn't looking too happy either, then again, that was his normal face. "Good job, Masaru," Naruto sighed. "An impressive victory," Shino, who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere agreed. "Your skills are definitely above average." Sasuke nodded to him, but didn't say anything. Why was it that everything that Shino said could have two meanings? Kimimaro sat down in a chair next to Sakura. He knew that Sasuke wouldn't turn up, even if he won quickly. He would be too upset, and he would think that it was saying something it wasn't. As if they hadn't known that Sasuke was sometimes ridiculously protective of Sakura sometimes. He tried to act cool, but no one was much fooled. Except maybe Sakura. Which made the whole thing even stupider. "Hey, Yuma." Kiba called from his bed. "Aren't you supposed to be calling me Yuma-sama?" Kimimaro asked, a little amusement in his eyes. What?" Kiba asked, then he remembered, "Oh, crud." Kimimaro smirked a little, but looked back at Sakura and the smirk died. She didn't look good. Sakura might have avoided being killed, but Yumi had broken her wrist and her neck was bleeding badly. There was even a little bit of bone peeking out of Sakura's wrist. Kimimaro looked at it in a dull kind of way, and remembered how he had used the skeleton of Kyoko to help him to cheat. Slowly, he touched Sakura's wrist and the bone, willing it to go back into its proper position. At first, nothing seemed to be happening, only that Kimimaro was starting to feel tired. Then he began to notice that the bone was starting to recede into Sakura's body. While Kimimaro couldn't fix the break, he could at least align the bones so they would heal properly. When the bone had completely receded, Kimimaro leaned back. "That was actually kind of cool," Kiba said. He had been leaning over, watching. "Is that a part of your Kekkai Genkai?" "Apparently," Kimimaro said with a slight sigh. "What, you don't know?" Kiba scoffed. "Kiba, let me ask you a question," Kimimaro said calmly. "If your clan had been wiped out when you were 9, and you didn't have a single item to teach you how to use your abilities, would you know the full extent of your capacity?" "Oh, sorry, sometimes I guess I don't think before I speak." Kiba looked a little embarrassed. "I guess I've acted like a bit of a jerk to you and your friends." "You were acting." For a second, Kiba looked angry, but he seemed to calm down. "I guess I kind of deserved that. Anyways, is your friend, I think it's Emi, going to be okay?" Kiba asked. Kimimaro looked at Sakura's form. "She'll be fine," he said at last. "She's been through worse. She just wasn't ready for this, I guess." "Yeah, it looks like she went up against Yumi." "Man, that chick is weird." Kiba leaned forwards conspiratorially. "I think she's really an alien." Kimimaro just stared at him. "No, really. She just popped up out of nowhere, I swear. Maybe she's a secret experiment of the Uchiha clan." Kiba rolled over, muttering to himself about the Uchiha and experiments and getting under her skin, and Kimimaro went back to staring absently at Sakura. One eye opened and Sakura smirked a little at him. Kimimaro blinked. Sakura opened both eyes and winked. She raised the one hand that was working and made a single seal. "I can't keep this up long, but no one should be able to hear us," Sakura said with a bit of a grin. "I shouldn't be conscious after all. No real genin would be. There's something that Yumi using on that thing's tip, a drug of some kind. It makes the thing it touches not react as fast as it should. Remember to tell the others that." "I will," Kimimaro promised. "So, how bad did it look?" Sakura asked, wincing a little. "Bad enough," was all Kimimaro said. Sakura sighed. "I couldn't break out without using Sensei's technique. Then we would have been caught." "It's alright. Someone else will just take your place in winning," Kimimaro told her. "It's not alright," Sakura grumbled. "I hate being weak. You know that. Now that stupid little Uchiha will be prancing around bragging about how I'm inferior. I can't allow that to happen again." "It's alright, your style of fighting was weak against hers," Kimimaro tried to calm her down. "Then I need to learn a new technique. Something that will allow me to fight in any range that I get caught in," Sakura said fiercely. "I refuse to be weak, and I refuse to lose again." By this time, she was coughing again and the genjutsu had all but broken. "So what happened after I passed out?" Sakura asked. "Masaru swore his revenge and proclaimed a blood feud," Kimimaro sighed. "That's going to be complicated," Sakura said after a moment. "I'm sure he'll be in here to explain once he's done murdering the person he went up against," Kimimaro smirked. The genjutsu faded and Sakura leaned back and once again pretended to be asleep. Kimimaro looked away, thinking about what Sakura had said. He smiled a little bit. It looked like one good thing had come out of this mission at least. Kimimaro sensed someone come in and looked up for the medic Nin. He felt himself relax a little as Tsunade herself appeared. She gave no sign that she knew him, and was accompanied by 2 medics. "We are truly honored that you've come of take care of the wounded, Tsunade-heim," one was saying. "If we had known you were coming, there would have been many more medics here." "That's why I didn't tell you," Tsunade said looking irritable. "I don't like to work when there are too many people around staring, and trying to get hints." The other medics looked a little uncomfortable. "Where's this girl who was so badly wounded?" Tsunade asked. "She's here," one of them said, regaining his senses. "We were worried that we might perform the procedure wrong on account of the fact that her bone was so badly displaced." Tsunade walked over to Sakura, ignoring Kimimaro the same way she would ignore an empty chair. She calmly examined Sakura, checking her wrist carefully. "I see nothing wrong with the bone alignment," she said, ignoring the sputtered protests of the medics. "See for yourselves, it is perfectly fine, other than the fact that it's been broken." "That's impossible," one of the women said. "We saw the bone poking out of her arm." "It was him." Kiba piped up. "His Kekkei Genkai does something with bones, and he made the bone that was sticking out of her arm go back in." Kimimaro closed his eyes briefly, wishing that Kiba had kept his mouth shut. While he didn't mind training, once someone's powers had a medical property, Tsunade would usually go overboard. Tsunade examined him carefully, her eyes given no sign that she had ever seen him before in her life. "That's an interesting gift," she remarked. "I'd like to see just how much you can do. It's too bad that you're from another village. I'm sure the medics there consider you a great asset." She didn't wait for Kimimaro to answer, but turned back to Sakura. There was a hidden meaning in those words that Kimimaro understood perfectly well. He would be training how to use that power for a very long time. Well, it might come in handy later, he reasoned. Maybe he could figure out how to make his opponents freeze or stumble, but Tsunade was going to be working him, well, to the bone, for a while until he could do it to her satisfaction. Naruto watched the computer with a bored look on his face, but his mind was really racing. Sakura wasn't supposed to lose. That would have been Hinata. They had drawn straws to see which 3 of the 9 were going to lose or forfeit. It would be best to have someone outside of whatever building that the exam was in, and Sakura was supposed to be the one who gave the signal in her battle by using a certain jutsu. This was going to change things slightly. Someone else would have to surrender and someone else would have to win. Naruto hated last-minute changes like this. Hopefully nothing really annoying would come from this. Finally there was a ping and 2 names appeared on the screen. Hideaki vs. Temari. Sai blinked and looked over at Temari thoughtfully. Naruto knew that he was weighing the odds of his being able to fight without using his scrolls or any genjutsu that was too advanced for a genin to use. Sai was a surprisingly smart ninja for all his lack of tact. He was weighing his odds out very carefully, and making some kind of decision. Sai had agreed to lose. For one thing, his style of fighting was too unique not to be remembered. For another thing, he was best at surveillance and sudden ambushes, not at head-on attacks, and Sai always played towards his strengths. Finally he seemed to make a decision and raised one hand. "I forfeit," he said calmly. "What?" Temari said angrily. "We haven't even begun. I can see from that weapon, which is not a club, that you are a long-range fighter. To fight you would be more embarrassing than to forfeit, so I'll choose the less painful choice." "Coward," Temari growled. Kyapi, Sai smiled. "Impo," Temari shot back. "Chikusho," Sai continued, still smiling. "As Hideaki has forfeited, the match goes to Temari," Hate said, not paying any more attention, and breaking Temari's concentration. "Just you wait, Gaki," Temari growled. "I'm going to tear off your limbs and use them to beat you to death." Sai just smiled. "Did you know that when you do that when you're smiling, it makes it 10 times more offensive?" Gaara asked him. "Yes, that's why I do it," Sai smiled. "You see, when your opponent is that angry, they can no longer think straight, which makes them a perfect target. An enraged opponent is about much more likely to make a stupid mistake that will leave them open to my attack." "And you say that Ryu is a closet evil mastermind?" Hinata shook her head. "I'm not a closet one. I'm out in the open," Sai said happily. "Well, you know, have a girl out for your blood," congratulations, Gaara sighed. Thanks. Naruto looked over at the computer again. This time, the board had a set of names that Naruto had to admit looked rather interesting. Akimichi Koji vs. Tsukakin. Naruto looked over at the two. Koji was eating a chip and seemed completely uninterested in the fact that his name had just been called up, and Kin was glaring over at him, sizing him up. Oh, great, I'm with the Chipaholic, she said, rolling her eyes. As long as he doesn't sit on me, I'll be fine. Naruto hit his head on his palm. I can't watch, he moaned. Naruto remembered the last time that someone had insulted Koji's weight. The poor guy had been squashed by the Akimichi family technique. It was only because the others dragged him away that he didn't break anything. Koji was big-boned, or husky, or plump. Anyone who said anything else would suffer the consequences of their folly. Usually in a very painful way. Koji hadn't seemed to have heard her, or maybe he wasn't as sensitive anymore. At any rate, both walked down the stairs and faced off in the arena. He smiled at Kin, who glared at him darkly, muttering something that Naruto couldn't hear. Koji just shrugged and ate another chip. This match is between Akimichi Koji of Konoha and Tsukakin of Oto. All rules of the previous battles apply, and Akimika-kun, food is not allowed in the arena. Hayate said. He really must have been getting bored with saying the same things. Koji looked at his chips and sighed a little, handing them to Hayate without saying anything. He didn't even ask him not to eat them. Apparently, he wasn't that interested. Begin, Hayate said. Kin threw 3 senbon, all of them narrowly missing Koji and landing on the wall behind him. Koji moved a little away from the senbon. Yeah, it's a good thing I stayed still, he remarked. Fatty, if I wanted to hit you, it wouldn't be that hard. Kin grumbled. There was complete and utter silence as Koji digested this statement. Finally it seemed that his mind had caught up with him. Who are you calling fat? Koji yelled, I'm big-boned. Yay for big-boned people. A dinosaur is big-boned, chunky, Kin sneered, you just have a blubber problem. Doomed, Shikamaru said softly. And I didn't even have to say anything. Ino shook her head. Nakuden Sensha. Koji yelled at the top of his lungs. His entire body suddenly expanded into what seemed to be a large ball with arms, legs and a head that all seemed to be engulfed in fat. Naruto truthfully couldn't think of a more appropriate technique for him to use. Kin's eyes widened briefly as she realized that she had made something of a mistake in mocking this guy's weight. Had she just fought him, she would have won much easier. Now, she was faced with a rather large problem. That was rolling towards her rather quickly. Suzu Senbon no Genkaku, Kin said, quickly making the seals. The bells on the senbon began to ring, tinkling innocently. The only thing that was strange was how Koji seemed to suddenly veer off course to the right of Kin, who smirked. Naruto assumed that since she was a sound nin, the bells were messing with Koji's mind. It was clever, he had to admit, but against someone like Kiba, it would have been useless. Kin jumped away and threw a barrage of kunao towards Koji, but because that he was spinning so much, the kunao that did hit didn't seem to do as much damage as they should have. Kin swore and jumped away from the rolling tank again, ringing the bells. This time the Koji ball seemed to start spinning, making the movement erratic and hard to read. It seemed to bounce around, spinning until it reached Kin. Kin had enough times to ring the bells loudly one final time before the ball hit. There was a sharp cry, an explosion, and a cloud of dust welled up, making it almost impossible for Naruto to see what was happening. When the smoke cleared, Naruto was able to see the two motionless figures of Kin and Koji. It looked like Kin knew a technique that could make the bells make people unconscious within a certain range, but Kin would also be caught in it. That would make it a technique only be used when defeat was inevitable. Actually, that was rather interesting, Niji remarked. Haku nodded. She's not using it to its full potential though, he said, maybe she's just learning to work with the frequencies. Both Tsukakin and Akimichi Koji are unable to battle. The match in a draw and both fail, Hayate proclaimed, after receiving a nod from Danzu. A group of medics ran into the arena to take both of the figures to whatever medical ward that they had made up. They were placed on stretchers and carted off as the computer began to sort through names again. Naruto watched again with a bored expression as the names appeared and disappeared until finally it stopped. Ryu vs. Taiki. Naruto started a little bit and looked at Haku. This is unexpected, he blinked. Haku nodded, well, Taiki, let's do our best. Taijutsu only? Naruto asked as the two walked down the stairs. Agreed, Haku nodded, no other jutsu whatsoever. Is a 5-minute time limit alight with you? Yeah, it'll keep me from slipping up and doing something too impressive, Naruto smirked. Haku smiled a little. Both walked into the arena and faced one another calmly. There wasn't any hostility from either person, nor was there any weakness. Both of them appeared both ready and willing to fight one another with everything that they had. This match is between Ryu and Taiki, both of Kusa, all former rules apply, Hayate said calmly. I hope that team loyalties will not interfere in this match. Neither Naruto or Haku responded, but Hayate seemed satisfied. Begin. Anko stared with disgust at something green and pickled that was floating in one of the jars in Orochimaru's underground lab. Why didn't they just clean it up? What was that thing anyways? It looked kind of like a floating head, but it could have been a sandwich-turned-science experiment, and with Orochimaru's research habits, it was possible. What are we doing here in the middle of the afternoon, Iruka? Anko asked, won't we be caught? Yojao did the genjutsu over us, and she's rather good, so I don't think so, Iruka smiled, and then his smile turned slightly vicious, we have an appointment with Tenzo. He's going to tell us what he's managed to learn. Anko stared at him. It's only been an hour, she remarked. That's all the time that he could have, Iruka sighed, it was only because that Kotetsu and Izumo are still in the position of the assistants to the Hokage dash. Gophers, coughed Anko. That Tenzo was able to get any kind of information at all. We have to deal with what we have. But we still don't know if they have an genjutsu over themselves or not to hide certain things, Anko pointed out, the information could easily be wrong. Iruka nodded, you're right, but we have to check. Konoha has plenty of enemies right now, and we need to know who it is and why they're doing it. Somehow, I think we'll know soon enough, Anko sighed, even if we don't find out. Everything seemed to be happening at once. There was a polite clearing of someone's throat behind them and Tenzo appeared. He was a good-natured man who had been in the Umbu before it had been pretty much disbanded. There was an Umbu, but it was mostly there for show. They were underfunded, had no power, and were generally ignored by everyone. It was a pitiful end for the group that was once considered to be the elite of the elite. Tenzo now was a simple jonin, but Anko couldn't say if he had any real status. He was too much a part of the old regime to go too far. It was strange that there was talk of Anko receiving a promotion when she didn't have the power in certain areas to be a jonin. It was because she had a bloodthirsty persona that seemed easy to exploit. Or maybe she would get assigned some mission that she couldn't handle on purpose. That was what had happened to Asuma's brother. He had been assigned a mission that he couldn't possibly have completed. Danzo would have had trouble completing it. It had been suicide as a solo mission, but he had accepted, as if it would prove his loyalty to Konoha. Naturally, he had been brought back in a white box for his family. That had been the last straw for Asuma. He had been the one who had first gotten them all together, it was a word-of-mouth group. Only people who they all knew were not loyal to the new Hokage were told of it. People whose loyalties were debatable or just hard to tell, like the old leader of the Umbu who Anko had never learned the name of, were left out of the group as well. They had to be more careful than ever when they had invaded Kumo. That was when Jiraiya had contacted them with the information that he had a team of ninja who would be willing and able to assist in any coup attempt that they planned. They were sorely outnumbered and needed all the help they could get. Besides, anyone Jiraiya trusted with this would have to be trustworthy. She hadn't thought that they were going to be the missing kids and their friends. Anko seriously wished that she could have seen them. Then again, they must have held back, and that would have disappointed her. Tenzo's voice broke Anko out of her thoughts and she listened to Tenzo's story. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to learn much of anything, he was saying. There are several people from various villages that are hostile or neutral that somewhat match the descriptions but not completely. It's probably a genjutsu of some kind. It seems that genjutsu specialists are becoming more and more common. And was there anything else? Irika asked. No, nothing important, Tenzo shook his head. I'm sorry, you too, but I really have to leave now. I'm going to be missed soon. That's fine, Anko said with a smile. Jane. Thank you for your hard work, Tenzo-san. Irika smiled politely. I'm sorry for dragging you into this and have you come back empty-handed. Tenzo smiled a little. It's not a problem. I'm just glad that I could help in any way that I could. I only wish that I could have done more. He disappeared very suddenly, but Anko barely paid any attention to him. After all, that technique was one that even she knew by heart. She looked over at Irika thoughtfully. There was no reason why this day should be a complete waste, and she had told that little white lie to his friend. They needed an alibi. A smile appeared on her face. So, Irika, how about coming with me for some dango? She smiled. Your treat. Of course what? Irika was very surprised. Oh, come on, Anko smirked. I'm bored, let's have some fun. Anko, did you just ask me on a date? He asked. Anko moved up closer to him. Well, I've been doing some thinking, and you're the only guy who actually treats me politely, so maybe I should grab you before someone else does. You make it sound like I'm some kind of luxury item, Irika sighed. I assume you mean now. Yep. You're going to harass me until I say yes, aren't you? Yep. Irika sighed. I might as well submit to fate. Yep. Naruto ducked down to avoid Haku's roundhouse kick and attempted to kick Haku's legs out from under him. Haku had already jumped back and was preparing to charge again. Anyone who said that Haku was bad at Taijutsu had never fought him. While he preferred to use his Kekkai Genkai, it wasn't because he was unable to do anything else. Haku was light, and that was something that he was able to use to his advantage. He couldn't hit as hard, but he could move faster than Naruto. Sometimes it was hard to tell who was faster, him or Sasuke. Naruto barely dodged a punch and finally managed to get a kick in. It connected, but it was only a glancing blow. Haku used the second that Naruto had overbalanced and punched him in the gut. Both sprang back, panting a little bit. This is getting annoying, Haku panted. Naruto wanted to tell him to stop over-dramatizing things but couldn't. He was over-dramatizing it just as bad. This was really starting to become a pain to be constantly pulling punches and doing obvious moves. If he wanted to spar with Haku, he could do it better on his own time. You're right, let's get this over with, Naruto said. Looking like he was going to run towards Haku and then jumping to the left, off a wall and then towards him from an angle. Haku jumped forwards to meet him, and Naruto fought against the urge to let out a very dramatic war cry. Haku's fist hit Naruto dead on, and the Mizu Bunshin popped, soaking Haku with water that was very, very sticky. Takei. Haku said angrily, I thought we said no jutsu. Oh, I thought you meant you weren't going to use jutsu. Naruto's voice said from somewhere, OPPs. It's been 5 minutes, and that was my jutsu, so I guess I win. Haku glared at him. You cheated. Ninja cheat. It's what we do, Naruto shrugged. Ryu has forfeited, the match goes to Takei. Hey was engulfed in a coughing fit. Was your sticky Mizu Bunshin really necessary? Haku hissed as they walked up the stairs where people couldn't hear them. Hey, it looked real didn't it? Naruto grinned, doing this little drama was kind of hard. And I had to give Danzu something to work with. Now he probably thinks I'm from Kiri. Aren't I brilliant? Haku laughed a little. You sure think so? I still wish that we could have just used Janken Pon instead. It would have saved so much time. You might have won, and then the plan would have been messed up, Naruto pointed out. This way, we both knew I was going to cheat or something at the end, and you were going to forfeit. It was actually easier. Well, now we've got the two who were supposed to lose and one who wasn't supposed to lose but did. Niji's going to have a problem. Check the description for the links to the author.